I would like to welcome you all to the PragatiE Vichaar Poetry Festival 2022. This has been organized by Frontlist with Pragati and the Federation of Indian Publishers. The idea behind this is that we felt that poetry as an art form is probably not being celebrated as much as it should be, and the kind of social impact that we can have through poetry. We wanted to revive it, or maybe take the first step towards getting it to the younger generation as well as connoisseurs around India and abroad. So thank you so much for sparing time out. Thank you so much for coming in. We would be airing this on the 21st of March, which is the World Poetry Day. And, we hope that we are sure actually that this session would be loved by people across the country as well as in other countries where we have our viewers. So on the panel today, we have four great individuals. We have Neil Daswani, we have Menka Shivdasani, Naina Kataria, and Archana Mirajkar. We welcome you all. Thank you so much again for sparing time out. And just I think Naina joined in after Jyotsna had briefed about the structure. So we would start off by the recitation from each one of you. And we'll follow it up with some generic questions about the social impact of poetry on the world, and the kind of impact that you feel it has on specific social issues. And we would love to have your comments on that. And so great. I think if you're all ready, we can start.
Sure.
So great. So the first panelist that we have today is Neil Daswani. So Neil is a recently retired career banker. He's a naturalized Singaporean of Indian origin. He's lived and worked in Singapore, Hong Kong, and the Middle East since 1989. So that's the year I was born in. He's had an international upbringing early in his childhood, followed by higher education in India. He hails from a family of English professors, and although he's not been formally trained in poetry, but I think that it'll be wise to say that it runs in his blood. He's had 4 great publications of poetic volumes, namely Why Now, Seen and Felt, Redshift, and most recently Camera and Quill. Neil's work has also been showcased and celebrated across literature festivals in India and Singapore. And we look forward to hearing your rendition, sir.
Thank you very much, Kushal. I look forward to that myself. So if you want me to just rattle through with all 3 poems, happy to do that. And I've selected some poems that will hopefully keep with the theme. And what I've tried to do for the benefit of my fellow panelists is to try and bring in gender-specific themes where I've written poetry on. And one of them as recently as this morning, so if it seems a little bit raw in its construct, my apologies. It still probably needs to be tweaked. So I'm going to read out a poem called Leaders of This Realm. I'll begin with that. And it relates to my banking career. I was fortunate enough throughout my career to be associated with formerly diversity and inclusion councils throughout. And it's a topic that was very close to my heart during my career. And I actually, on International Women's Day last year, not this, wrote a poem called Leaders of the Realm. So I'm going to start with that. Okay, so Leaders of this Realm, an ode to women leaders on International Women's Day. Not one to tiptoe over eggshells, whether real or perceived. You glide over shattered glass, all the ceilings you've broken through. What one sees is what one gets. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You fight your corner, never settle, no white flags of defeat. You take setbacks in your stride. Nothing seems to overwhelm. You step up to every challenge in response to those who disbelieved. We have many leaders like you now. Once there were only just a few. The trailblazing path you always set is so easy for your team to find. All for one and one for all makes this togetherness complete. So a shout out to all our women then, leaders of this realm. So that's now been published in what I call my sixth book. It's called All the Shades of Truth, and hopefully you can see it there. That was launched earlier this month at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and on Sunday in Singapore, it's going to be sort of launched in parallel at the Singapore Book Bazaar.
Great. And really nice, and it throws light on the changing demographics that we have, that we see every day around us.
Yeah, we can probably get into more than just the bare bones of it. We can get into the construct and what it means, especially within a corporate environment where obviously that's what I'm most familiar with. Kushal, I thought it would be remiss of me to not attempt a poem with an Indian context, and it's a historical context. And I am a bit hesitant because obviously this is the theme is one that all of us know. We've learned about this wonderful heroic lady. All of us have read and probably memorized the original, and it's not an attempt at translation, but it's just my thoughts. It's a little anglicized, so I beg everyone's pardon. So it's Jhansi Ki Rani. Let's pay homage to the Queen of Jhansi, brave hero of our land. Fearsome warrior Rani Lakshmi Bai, she stood firm and took a stand. The company wanted Jhansi through a doctrine known as lapse, scheming that Jhansi and its regent would keel over and collapse. Little did they realize that she was made of sterner stuff. I'll never give up Jhansi, though the going may get tough. How did this young girl Manu become Rani Lakshmi Bai, wise and equal ruler on whose counsel her husband did rely? Born in Varanasi, her father, advisor to the second Baji Rao, orphaned at an early age, she lived on at his court somehow. This proved to be a blessing. Tatya, Nana, and she were friends. It is to dueling companions and comrades true loyalty extends. Described as being slightly stout, she was always stout of heart. She learnt the skills of combat, learnt that statecraft was an art. She fenced and fought and used her sword as good as any man. She became a just and clever ruler of the kingdom that she ran. Her pockmarked face went unnoticed as her inner beauty shone. She only paused to take a breath when her duties had been done. She escaped the siege of Jhansi through her bold and daring plan. Clad in simple clothes, a turban, she got mistaken for a man. She sneaked out past the barricades and rode out to the dawn. Before her enemy even knew it, she escaped with her adopted son. She always fought with courage, her sword song full of valor, defending her beloved Jhansi or taking the battle out to Gwalior. She brandished her trusty sword and sliced her way through foe. She met every thrust with a parry as she fought them toe to toe. Tatya and Nana, valiant and responsive, galloped to her rescue. Alas, for poor Jhansi, Rose's army did not let them through. Though defeated in that last battle, her name shines on to this day. She was an inspiration to all women. She showed us another way. Thank you. With your permission, Kushal, I'm going to request that I be given the liberty of reading the third poem after we do the section on Maya, if we get there. So it's a direct response, if you will, to a similar theme. So if you'll indulge me. So thank you. With that, I'll hand over to the next reader.
Definitely. And I think a beautiful poem, definitely. And I think the line where you said that she paused to take a breath on only when her responsibilities were done. Lovely, lovely thought, and I think beautifully.
Thanks, Kushal. I did a little bit of research, as the poem probably reveals, and it was hugely significant that Hugh Rose at the end of it said that the Indian Mutiny of 1857, if it produced one man, and that man was a woman. I mean, that was just a stunning, and it wasn't flattery coming from the enemy. So I just thought that was a fantastic summary of what she represented. Anyway.
Brilliant thought, and beautifully written. Thank you so much. Great. Moving on to our next poet for the evening. We have Menka Shivdasani. Menka Shivdasani has 4 poetry collections. She's a co-translator for Freedom and Fishers, an anthology of Sindhi partition poetry. She has edited a Sparrow anthology of women's writing and 2 anthologies of contemporary Indian English poetry. Menka has also worked extensively in the field of Sindhi literature and has edited 3 books by Sindhi writer Mohan Gyani. In March of 2022, her poem A Tale of the Mountains, based on Sindhi poetry, was made into a film by Sushil Gajwani. She has also received the Eco's Literary Award and the W.E. Eunice D'Souza Award. In 1986, she founded Poetry Circle in Bombay, now Mumbai. So great, welcome, ma'am, and looking forward to your great poems.
Thank you so much, Kushal. It is a pleasure to be here. I will begin with a poem called Kites. And I'm going to read poems from my book Frizzle, which you're seeing inside out. This is really a collection of my poems from 1980 to 2017. So it goes backwards from the most recent to earlier poems written when I was 16. So Kites is a relatively recent poem, and it goes like this. Kites are flimsy, fragile, decorative, paper thin, bearing their wooden cross, biding their time in airless drawers, hidden away from the sky. Kites are nasty, like women. Sharp-edged, they fly against the clouds, bite into your hand. The threads they bear have hidden shards of glass, unfurling as they gauge the weft of wind. You who stand on the parapet edge, believing you hold the strings, look up where it hovers and rustles. Kites are nasty. They soar, they tug against the reins, catch the nearest squall, and disappear. You will only be left with a stinging hand and an empty space above. The next poem I'm going to read is called Iron Woman. There are 2 versions of this poem, actually. I'm going to read the shorter version.
Sure.
Iron Woman. Woman of iron from an exploded star. I embed myself in a crusty earth that waits for the sun to rise. Hammer me into sheets. Stretch me into wires. I will turn into a plow or light up the world in return. Freed from the meteorite with lightning tongue, I expand without breaking. You may melt me and mix me. I emerge even purer, magnetic and ready to strike. Iron woman in her element. And the third poem is one that usually brings a smile to people's faces, so I will go with that rather than with the more violent poems in my book. So as many people who run households, and I will not just say women, but as many, people who have to manage the daily humdrum of running a household, usually that is women.
Right.
You end up doing a lot of very mundane chores that just get repetitive. So
Right.
one of those things is boiling milk,
Okay.
right? You get your fresh milk in the morning, you boil it, then you boil it at 4 o'clock in the evening so it doesn't go bad. Then you boil the leftover the next morning. When the fresh milk comes, you boil that as well as the fresh milk, and it just goes on. And one day I found myself speaking to the milk pot. So
Wow.
here is the woman who speaks to milk pots. Boil. I shall ignore that steely glint and watch you. I am simmering too, padding about with cotton ball claws, arching my back before the flickering flame, scratching beneath my ear. You got the cream melded into every drop. I will bide my time till you separate and strain you through wire mesh. I'm on edge now, about to overflow. Don't sit so self-contained, snow white and cold. I shall turn the heat up, put the lid on. Watch me.
Wow. Wow. It just shows that, poetry is everywhere. Yeah, the context and the words so deep and lovely. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great. So moving on, it just keeps getting better. Moving on to our next poet for the evening, Naina Kataria. Naina works as a copywriter at an advertising agency while dabbling in music, poetry, and teaching on the side. She started a career at TVS. Great work you guys do there. And since then, she has led 2 award-winning campaigns. Her work, primarily inspired by her experience of living in a capitalist patriarchal India, has been featured on notable platforms like the Tribune, Indian Express, International, and many others. Naina lives her life by the belief that every good that happens in the world takes place because somewhere someone decided to show the kindness that they never received. Wow. I think this is the most understated thought, but the most profound one as well. The world becomes a better place by people who are kind and who show that kindness that they never received. Great. So, Naina, looking forward to your work.
Thank you so much, and really glad to be present amongst all of you. So much more experienced and learned than I am. And yeah, also one more thing, I didn't know that the whole thing's gonna be in English. My poem is in Hindi, so I hope that's okay. Yeah. All right.
The worse it gets, the better it becomes.
All right, sure. So I just have one poem. It's fairly long, but just to give a context of my work, most of it has been around my experiences as an individual woman struggling to find her own space in a society which shows a picture of freedom that is not very coinciding with her own idea of freedom. And what happens when she decides to ask for something that is truly of herself and not coinciding to something that a society wants her to accept and adopt in the name of independence. So what happens then? The poem is titled Ek Adad Kamre Ki Zarurat Hai. Adad is alone, a room of one's own. It's also a book written by Virginia Woolf, right? So in her time, the struggle was mostly related to women's financial independence and, their physical being, like just their physical spaces. But like come to our time, a lot of things have changed and a lot of things still haven't. So a lot of our freedom and a lot of our independence is packaged as something else. It can be something like your freedom to wear whatever you want, but actually a lot of our fashion is being decided by someone else. So are we really choosing that? Right? So, and when we do get to choose the things that we ask for, do we really get them? So that is what my work is mostly about. And my poem is titled Ek Adad Kamre Ki Zarurat Hai. And now I'll just begin with that. एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसमें घुसते ही बिखेर दिए जाएं कपड़े, बटुए, टांगे और सुघड़ होने की सारी उम्मीदें। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसमें महसूस किया जाए हवा का स्पर्श, जिसमें बैठकर सुनी जाए अपनी सांसों की, धड़कन की एक एक आवाज, बिना मुंह पर हाथ रख के हंसा जाए और बिना दरवाजा बंद करे रोया जाए। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसके तार पर चैन से सूखे अंदरूनी कपड़े, वो अंदरूनी कपड़े जो बाजारों में बिकते हैं ख्वाहिश की तरह और अलमारी के कोने में बसते हैं शर्म की तरह, जो कभी जीन्स कभी पल्लू के नीचे ढके जाने से जरा देर से सूखते हैं। उन अंदरूनी कपड़ों को जरा तार पर खुलकर लिटाया जाए और करारी धूप का घूंट पूरे दिन पिलाया जाए। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसके शीशे में खुद को देखें तो शरीर दिखे, कोई ऐब नहीं। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसमें ना लक्ष्मण की सुरक्षा हो, ना किसी ढोंगी मुनियों का डर, ना पति का इंतजार हो, बस कुछ किताबें, चाय की एक प्याली और हिरण जैसी सोच जो दौड़े ख्यालों के क्षितिज की ओर। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है जिसमें कुछ पल के लिए ही सही हम ना चुड़ैल हो, ना परी हो, ना नौकर हो, ना लक्ष्मी हो, ना बेटी हो, ना बीवी हो, ना शरीफ हो, ना अश्लील हो, बस कुछ पल के लिए हम इंसान बन जाएं। एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है अपने ख्यालों के लिए, उन अंदरूनी कपड़ों के लिए जो खुला आकाश ना देख सके, उस आजादी के लिए एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है। इसलिए एक काम करना, जब कभी तुम्हें दौलत शोहरत के सपने दिखाए जाएं, मुंह मोड़ लेना। एक काम करना कि जब कभी तुम्हें दौलत और शोहरत के सपने दिखाए जाएं, मुंह मोड़ लेना। जब कभी तुम्हें चमकीले सपने दिखाए जाएं, नाता तोड़ देना। ये जान लेना कि सोने का सही ये जूता है, हील्स, सोने का सही ये जूता है, इसे पहन के बाहर से कितने भी चमको, अंदर से टूट जाओगे। आकाश जरूर तुम्हारा है, ये जान लेना। ये जान लेना कि ये आकाश तुम्हारा है, पर तुम गुलेल नहीं, तुम पंछी हो। गुलेल जब उड़ती है तो उसका नीचे आना तय होता है और वो डिसाइड नहीं कर पाती है कि वो कब नीचे आएगी। बट जब पंछी उड़ता है तो वो अपना रहना कंट्रोल कर सकता है और वो अपनी स्पीड से नीचे आता है और फिर अपनी मर्जी से ऊपर उड़ता है। इसलिए तुम गुलेल नहीं, एक पंछी हो। इस चमक से कोसों आगे, तुम जैसी भी हो अच्छी हो। तो जब कभी तुम्हें दौलत के, शौहरत के सपने दिखाए जाएं, मांगना बस ये कि आपकी नजरों से दूर, आपकी सोच से परे, हमें केवल एक अदद कमरे की जरूरत है।
वाह,
Wow, wow, brilliant. This reminds me of something we used to read in school. I think maybe Naina seems to be of that age when we would have that in our school books. Which so there was a poem which went like, "हम पंछी उन्मुक्त गगन के, पिंजरबंद ना रह पाएंगे, कनक तीलियों से टकराकर पुलकित पंख टूट जाएंगे." Brilliant, Naina. I think you just made my day. Lovely poem. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great. So our final guest for the evening is Archana Mirajkar. Hi, ma'am. Welcome. Archana is an author who writes in English as well as Marathi. Her latest book, Swayam Siddha, is the stories of rebellious women from Mahabharat. Archana hosts a YouTube series called Granth Yatra that showcases 100 best books in Marathi literature. Archana also works as a senior media and communications officer at a foreign mission in New Delhi. Welcome, ma'am, and we look forward.
thank you. Thank you. So, as you mentioned, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and especially in such creative company. So, really appreciate that. And as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm basically a writer of stories and novels. So I've written novels, I've written short stories, I've written long stories. I only occasionally write poetry when I want to take a respite from that long form of writing. So here are two short poems for you. The first poem is called When I Take to Wings. So this is a poem, to give you a context, it's about a woman who's aspiring to achieve a lot in her life. And she knows that she doesn't have her, somebody who would inspire her, somebody who would hold her hands, but she has had mentors. And this is she's talking to or writing about somebody who has kind of helped her achieve, and now she's going on her path ahead.
Wow.
So when I take to wings, as I march along the road, your eyes follow me no more. I climb the summit, take the plunge, cross the hurdles, reach the turn. Further and further, the path winds. It leads me not where you stand, yet your shadow stalks my land. I halt, turn, and glance back. Call your name, show my track. Fainter and fainter, my echo sounds. But when my path touches the sky, and when I am ready to fly, will you lend me your hand again and gently guide my swing? For I want those eyes to see when I take to wings. So that's the first one.
Lovely.
And the second one is a pair of honest eyes. There could be anybody's eyes, but
Right.
eyes which act as inspiration again.
Wow.
A pair of honest eyes. Yes, I have seen a pair of honest eyes in the forest of wolves standing tall and pygmies baring their sharp teeth to rip you apart, to devour all. They shone like a beacon on a deserted street. Yes, I have seen a pair of honest eyes, honest and frank, like those of a child, parting the waters of convention and style. They have given me a glimpse of the primordial mind, where the seed of God has taken root and will one day grow into a mythic tree. Yes, I have seen a pair of honest eyes. Yes, I have met a pair of honest eyes.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Lovely, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was great. Neil, sir, I think you wanted to recite one more composition at the end. Would you?
Well, what I thought I'd do is wait till we get to the lovely poem, and mine has a similar theme. So if we have time.
Yes, definitely.
We can probably insert it at that point if we have the time. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Great. So we have some questions which we've got from our viewers, readers, and our internal panel, and I would like to pose those questions to you. The session is about writing your own destiny, and we have a couple of questions which we would like to have your opinions on, your views on. The first one, I think we've covered a lot of this in our compositions, but still, we would still want to know your personal opinion on this. Our society, it mostly projects the false virtues of women rather than actually appreciating them for who they are. Nevertheless, in spite of all this, we've seen that women have achieved their, or are in the process of achieving their true potential in society. What are your views on that? Why do you think, firstly, that society does that? And secondly, how do you think that in spite of all the obstacles, women are coming ahead and achieving their full potential? So open to all of you for comment.
Well, I'll take a stab at it if I may.
Yes.
Sort of harking back, there's a little bit of an echo, harking back to the, you still get an echo?
Okay. Oh, it's good. It's good. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good. So harking back to the poem sort of leaders of this realm, and just to sort of give a macro economic sort of context to the theme, both internationally and I guess it's fashionable to look at Fortune 500 companies, and I'm giving it a corporate twist deliberately. And you sort of look at that, and of the top 500 Fortune 500 companies, there are only 41 women executives and only 2 Black women executives, which sort of puts things in perspective. Obviously, there's progress. If you look over time, a few years ago, that number was much smaller. So one mustn't sort of debunk or discount the progress made. But obviously, there's a huge amount of headroom to improve things. But closer home to India, despite the fantastic economic progress, one has seen a decline in female participation in the overall labor force. So that's at the sort of macroeconomic level. And it just strikes me, your question is an interesting one. And as I was Googling in preparation for this session, I entered into the search bar the 50 most accomplished women in India. And to my horror, the next banner beneath it was the 50 most desirable women in India. And no, it was shocking that those two adjectives would be juxtaposed and go hand in hand. And I'll just leave it at that. And, it was a very rude wake-up call for me this morning as I looked at that. And I just said, obviously, progress has been made. My poem harks to some of that progress. I myself have seen it in the 35 odd years that I've been in corporate life, but there's just so much more. And I think rather than say, what is, someone else doing, what are you doing in your little world to make an impact or have that impact? And are you doing that every day, every moment? Are you making sure that you're encouraging that? Because it's not going to happen automatically and on its own, unfortunately. It's not at that steady state. So.
Right. Totally. I really agree with what you just said.
May I add a poetic context to this?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that Neil brought up this issue of how the corporate world ignores women. It's
Right.
very unfortunate, and but the problem is that women have always been either goddesses or chattel. You're not seen for what you are and who you are. And through all this, I think that women poets have always written their destinies. Whether you go back to Mirabai, whether you go back to Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath, so many amazing contemporary Indian women poets. Salma, Kuti Revati. Kuti Revati wrote a poem called Breasts, and for that she was told that she should be burned alive on the streets of Madras. I don't think that much has changed in the time that Madras became Chennai. I think we still, we still have all these issues. But women have always talked about both the so-called personal issues that women are supposed to be associated with, as well as larger context. So Eunice D'Souza brought out this book, Women's Voices, Selections from 19th and early 20th century Indian Writing in English. And she pointed out in the foreword, she said that these were women who are political activists, diplomats, legislators, doctors, writers, and many of them had the word first attached to their, whatever field they were in.
Yeah.
And I think that Indian writing today has really made huge progress. Women are writing and changing the whole tone and tenor of contemporary poetry. There is a lovely quote in this book, Women Hold Up Half the Sky.
Lovely.
This is edited by Ajit Kaur, Noor Zahir and Savita Singh in 2013. And it's a long paragraph. I don't think it's time to read the whole thing, but I just want to, the world, it says, the world today has to accept that speaking women are a reality. And what they are saying has to be heard and accepted. Women, having once found their voice, are no longer going to exist as beings that would be seen but not heard, and often not even be seen. And then she goes on to quote Andrew Lloyd, saying that, once you start to speak, people will shout at you, they yell at you, and they'll put you down. But through all this, you become stronger, it becomes easier to speak. And then the people who dump you because you're speaking, it's okay, because you'll find others who recognize you for what you are. I think women have gained that self-confidence today. I suspect they've
Just a
always
leading
had.
question to that. Just a leading question. I wanted to understand why is it that you feel that society conceives of a negative aspect when a woman tries to take action for their own lives? Just when you said, when they try to speak up, when they try to do anything, when they try to do something which is not in the traditional construct. Although that is not something which in isolation would be considered to be a wrong thing to do. Why is it that women are subjected to that kind of a perceptive bias?
I just have one word answer to that, which is insecurity. I'm sure the other co-panelists will have much more.
There is, I mean, yeah, I agree with her. There is an inherent need to control, and anything that a person does in the spirit of freedom comes across as a threat to one's need to control individuals around them. And the point that Neil sir said earlier, that the most influential accompanied by most desirable, I think that sort of thing happens when we try to move forward to be more woke and more socially aware or more inclusive. But at the same time, we can't really let go of our previously held insecurities, conditioning. So we're not able to let go of that. So when a woman decides that, okay, fine, we should, have spaces for women who work, we are not really able to create systems where we are also telling the men that, listen, she's going to go out to work, so you need to learn to do a lot of the housework so that she's not overburdened, she doesn't have to cook when she comes back. So there needs to be a system for that. What we do instead is, okay, fine, you go outside, you work, and then we'll hail you as a goddess because you come back and you make food also, and then you bring up the kids also. And if you don't teach them right, they'll also tell you ki maa ne kuch nahi sikhaya hai. So all of that will happen. We did not really divide the responsibilities when we should have. So it just became, we were not able to let go of our conditioning, which dictates that, a woman is supposed to is nothing more than what she looks like. So I could be the most intelligent person on the earth, but if I'm talking and I'm fat, or maybe I'm very dark skinned, the first comment that I will get from a few people is, okay, like, who is this fat person, right? We are not able to see women as a sum of what they look like, which is why that article comes in. Okay, like, even these media companies, the content creators, they know that, this is something that people will read. So that is why they felt the need to create an article like that, we'll talk about people's desirability, and desirability means what a person looks like. So we need to let go of our conditioning to be able to move forward. So there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do.
I totally agree with Naina ji that, there is so much of binary conditioned into our, bringing up our existence. We always think of somebody as a man, somebody as a woman. I think that we should, now that we are in the 21st century, we should stop looking at these binaries or, treating the third gender as something totally separate. We should look at each and every person as a human being first. And unless we start teaching that right from the childhood, that each and every person as a human being is special and brings certain qualities to the table wherever he or she might be. Right. So just to give another poetic context, I also agree with Menka ji that women have always, stood up and tried to break these barriers to their progress. So let me just quote a couple of poems from the early 1900s. I mean, today we are so aware about gender equality. We talk so much. Whether we have achieved it or not is a different question altogether. But at least people are aware and talking about it or striving for it. But in the early 1900s, when everybody was, there was so much of oppression, one poet, Bharat Tambe or B.R. Tambe in Marathi, he was one of the first poets to write about women as individuals. And he writes, Bhayachakita namave tuza ramani jana kase tudaviti tuza charani. It can be translated as, you inspire awe and wonder and command respect. How do people trample you with their feet? The past was born from your womb, the present plays in your lap, and the future waits for your call, O maiden. So, he expresses his trust in a woman's strength. And the second poem I want to quote is Bainabai Chaudhary. He was a farmer, She was an illiterate woman, but she had this tremendous gift of composing poetry, and she would compose poetry while she went about her work in the farm, and other people wrote it down. And she writes, after her husband died when she was very young, and she took up the challenge and worked tilled her farms. And she writes, "The bangles are broken, but my wrists are strong.
Wow.
The wedding necklace is gone, but my fidelity is sound. Do not pity me, ladies. Do not feel sorry. I have overcome emotion and will care for myself."
Wow. Wow. What a beautiful thought. Great. Thank you so much. I think Pragati has been pinging us that we are probably a little over time. So, okay, I had one more question, and I think that would be a good, we would love to have your views on that. Poetry is a great artistic expression, which does give voice to our thoughts, and it also has the power to reach a lot of people. What do you think poetry can do to inspire people to actually take a step towards whatever they consider to be the correct thing to do? How do we use this medium to actually bring about positive change in society? And thus, branching out, what role do you think poets play in today's modern world?
Okay, I'll go first.
Sure.
So for the first question, I think the way we can use poetry to bring about a positive change in today's society is by preferring to tell our own stories. Okay, so I mean, a lot of people, they tend to appropriate and like tell somebody else's story from their own lens. That is all not always a good thing, because that's just one person's perspective, and it kind of gets stuck there in an echo chamber where other people who agree with it also just laud you, and that's the end of it. I think if I'm to write about a sex worker, there's only so much that I can write about it. Nobody can tell the story better than the person who is living it. So I think we should be more encouraging and inclusive of people who have their own stories to tell, as opposed to taking the mic and telling our versions of somebody else's story. If you want to tell your story, tell your own story. And I'm sure we've all lived lives, like lived a lot of lives, so we have our own instances to share. So that's there. And what was the other question? Sorry.
And thus, we wanted to know that what role do you feel poets would play in the modern day world?
So I think anybody who writes is somebody who has, I mean, they might not read everything in the world, but they have read some stuff. They have some idea of how people think, how the world works, any observation. Writers are inherently observant people. So what that gives you is some sort of a foresight as to what is likely to happen, what tends to happen. And a lot of inferences about people can be generalized very easily. So just taking that and using in our real life, maybe that is something that we can give to the world, because observation gives you a lot of foresight. There are so many things that a lot of poets have written about years and years ago, and we read it in this day and we still feel that it's relevant. That is because of their observation, and that is the foresight that they are giving to us. We are somewhat benefiting from it. So that is a gift that we can carry on giving to the future generations and the generations of today as well. The hindsight, the foresight, the inferences, the ability to reflect is something that we can give away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was really helpful and really appreciated. Anyone else wants
Just to add to Naina's, I would say that, poets have always inspired us, right from the time of the epics down to today's world. I mean, all through, if you just see India, it went through the Renaissance, it went through the social reform movement, it went through the independence movement. And at all these stages, there were poets across all languages in India who inspired people and kind of gave them goals which are, higher than your day-to-day life. So a
Right.
poet brings a perspective. We are all caught up in our day-to-day life so much that you sometimes are unable to step back and look at the bigger picture, and poets provide that perspective. So let me give you another quick example. This is Sharat Chandra Muktibodh, who was writing in 1957. And
Right.
he wrote a poetry that was a time, immediately, soon after 10 years after the independence, and India was, forming as a new nation. And there was a lot of angst among the people and a lot of insecurity. But again, everything, all the problems were not solved, but there was hope. So he writes, a red flame is a great answer to books as high as mountains and to anxious questions never asked. When it is spotted, dreams get wings, and stars running after night are glimpsed. A tractor of revelation begins to move on the field of darkness and begins to sow sparks. There are dreams of golden harvest, and I see golden trails winding through a mountain of darkness. Words turn into eagles, the sky covers beneath their wings. Sweet songs of the flour mill can still be heard because I too have seen such a flame, which is why I am so relaxed.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Great words. Great.
That was beautiful, Archana. That was really
Thank
lovely.
you so much.
So I think that the poet's job is to tell the truth about society, about the world. The things that are seen, the things that are unseen. Hold a mirror up and say, okay, this is what it really is. And poetry is also one of the earliest forms of literature. In fact, there are studies, researchers in Berlin have pointed out that poetry goes back to 4,300 years ago. The most ancient record of human literature goes back to that time. And people have conducted studies on how, because of this long association that poetry has had with human nature and human experience,
Right.
it has a very strong grip on human cognition and human emotion. And it acts as a really powerful stimulus. And we've seen this in so much inspiring, rousing poetry that builds the sense of community. Whether it is, there were, at the time of independence, for example, there were some 75 poets, Sindhi poets, who published their work talking about independence.
Right.
And that sense of community is something that exists today in movements like the 100,000 Poets for Change, where I've been involved for the last 11 years, where that creates bonds across cultures. And you realize that really we are talking about the same human experience everywhere. And I think that that is a fundamental reason for poetry to exist. Dylan Thomas said this. He said, the world is never the same once a good poem has been added to it. A good poem helps to change the shape of the universe, helps to extend everyone's knowledge of himself and the world around him.
Wow.
That or her.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Great words, great thoughts. Neil, sir, you would want to add something? Yeah. I think you're on mute. Neil, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to what Menka said, where she touched upon the aspect of poetry dealing with truth. And certainly, given the very construct of poetry in its very essence, because it's so short relative to the novel and longer form, and obviously Archana can speak to that, it does sort of very quickly either ring true or not. And I've tried to touch upon that aspect. And in fact, the title poem, and maybe instead of reading the poem I'd mentioned, I'll just quickly read that out. If poetry is dealing with truth, at the same time, I'll just quote before I read my poem, what Robert Frost said, poetry is what gets lost in translation. And, I think it's a reminder that, we shouldn't indulge in deity speak or, kind of my way or the highway. And if anything, the truth is the sum of all perceptions, just to kind of add to what Menka was saying. So very quickly, if I may, All the Shades of Truth, which is the title poem. You who have seen the light of day, clear white light of the morning ray, and looked upon it as some single truth. You were younger then and in your youth. So much older now, no fear of dark. Most nights pass by without remark. You no longer view the black with dread, just another truth where lies were spread. To pursue what's true, search in between, look to the gray where the truth was seen. Within the half-truths and the compromise, hidden in the gap where the truth tells lies.
Wow.
Nice.
Where the truth tells lies. Brilliant thought. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for sparing out time and your beautiful thoughts for us and the lovely audience that we have. I would again want to appreciate each one of you for the wonderful work you've done and shared with us.